My other boss, Nelson Mandela, would be angry with me if I didn't do it. I worked with Nelson Mandela for a number of years on his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, and he's the godfather to one of my sons, and he was, more importantly for tonight, not only a great leader, a world historical leader, but he was a student of leadership. And all of his life, he tried to nourish young leaders. In fact, he had a lovely thing that he did when he would meet very small boys and girls. He would lean down and say hello, and he would always ask them the same question, first question, which was, "What did you have for breakfast this morning?" And I always thought that was funny. And he wasn't kidding around, and sometimes they were overawed, small young African boys and girls. But part of that was his idea that leaders, there's nothing too small for a leader. Of course, there's nothing too big. But leaders have to make sure that the smallest things are working in a way that benefits all of us in the long run. Now, he had a belief about leadership, which is that there's one thing that unites all leaders. Anybody want to guess what that is? It's not what you think. It's not being tall and strong like he was, or having a fantastic smile like he did, or having physical courage like he did, but something he said which is even rarer than physical courage, which is moral courage. It's not any of those things. The single prerequisite for leadership is the willingness to lead, is the willingness to take one step forward and say, yes, I'm going to do that, follow me. And that's something that all of you have done already, which is why YSEALI is so important. And it's impossible in some ways to compare yourself, any of us, to Nelson Mandela. And there was a Scottish philosopher, Thomas Carlyle, who posed the question, does history make the man, or does the man make history? He believed in the great man theory of history, that people changed history. Nelson Mandela, who changed history, would say that was completely wrong. Because the circumstance make the leader. There's a beautiful old English expression, cometh the moment, cometh the man. Nelson Mandela would say the only reason he became a great leader was because he had to, because people needed him, and because he was willing to take that first step forward. All of you have taken that step forward already. All of you have done it without the crisis that he faced and the momentous world events that other leaders have made them go forward. But I would say that makes you leaders even more so, because you're leading in a circumstance where nobody is pushing you forward, you're pushing yourselves forward. And what the U.S. feels is so important about YSEALI is not collecting leaders, but making sure that you work with each other. There's no particular ideology or idea that we want to promote. What we really want to promote is you all making connections with each other, making connections with each other, which will take you and ASEAN into the future. So I want to commend you for being participants in YSEALI. I'm jealous of the town hall that you will be doing with President Obama. I know he wants to talk to you, and so congratulations on participating in this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Under Secretary Stengel. And now, Malaysia is known for its amazing food, and we hope you enjoyed the appetizers. To begin your ASEAN culinary journey, we're delighted to announce that dinner is now served. Enjoy.
only hard one. No, but in the United States we joke because so many friends.
You're By show of hands here, how many of you have ever been bungee jumping? All right, we got a few. Okay, so I'm standing on this platform. My hands are sweating profusely. My knees are shaking. And all I can think about is, why did I decide to climb up on this platform? This was such a dumb idea. Okay, another show of hands. How many of you would like to jump off a platform 150 meters in the air? Okay, a couple more hands. So let me ask you a question. Before you do so, would you like to receive just a few instructions about what you're supposed to do before you jump? Yes, me too. That was my thinking. So I don't know if it was because where I was or the company that I chose to go with, but I received 0 instructions. So I walk over to our guide, who's from New Zealand. He's this huge 6'4" tall guy, 250 pounds. He's got this wild hair, crazy eyes. And I'm like, excuse me, sir. I wasn't given any instructions about what I'm supposed to do. And he just starts laughing hysterically. And I'm like, okay, this is doing nothing to calm my nerves. And he says, don't worry about it. You don't need any instructions. All you have to do is tuck your chin, lift up your arms, and dive head first off the platform. And I'm like, hang on just a second. Head first? Why do I have to dive head first? And he's like, well, your feet are strapped together, so if you just step off the platform, as soon as your rope hits the bottom, you're going to spring back up and you can snap your back. And so 2 thoughts are running through my head. 1, why didn't you tell me this before I climbed all the way up here? And 2, why are you telling me this now when you know that I'm freaking out? So I'm there with a couple other people on the platform, and they're all sort of chatting together nervously, not really wanting to think about what they're about to do. And there's a couple people from Kenya, a couple from Sweden, a couple from South Africa, and then another girl with me named Tonya from China. And so I go over to Tonya and I'm saying, Tonya, can you believe that we're about to do this? And she can't even speak to me, she's so scared. And then all of a sudden her eyes light up and she's like, Sarah, I've got an idea. I'm like, all right, perfect, let's hear it, because I'm open to anything at this point. She's like, Sarah, we don't really know anybody here. Nobody would know if we jumped or not. We could just say that we jumped and just climb back down the ladder. I'm like, Tonya, you're a genius. Of course, that's exactly what we have to do. So I go back over to the New Zealander. I'm like, listen, thanks, but no thanks. I think we're going to pass. So about that time, there's this whoosh that goes right past me. And the South African dude dives off the platform head first. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy just killed himself. What just happened? And so I'm turning around, and it was at that point that his bungee cord hit the bottom, bounced back up, and all you can see is, this is awesome! And he goes back down. And so the New Zealander turns to me and he says, Sarah, I just have one question for you. Next week, 3 months, 6 months from now, are you going to regret not jumping? And everything around me froze. And I realized what an amazing opportunity I had, not only to be in Uganda, at the source of the Nile River, but having this amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that I couldn't let my fear of jumping hold me back. So, I grabbed Tonia's hand and I said, all right, we're going to do this. We crept up to the edge, dove head first, and down we went. Bungee! And so as we're being lowered down into the boat after we jumped, you see everybody up on shore, high-fiving, jumping around, full of adrenaline. And then I noticed one guy off to the side. And he's sitting there with his sort of knees tucked in and his head down. And I realized that he didn't jump. So everybody here in this room has all been given this amazing opportunity. We're all fortunate enough to be here for the next 3 days and creating these projects that are going to drastically improve and change the community that you're living in. So we're going to have a panel now that is on the power of youth to drive social change. So I'm going to go ahead and invite our panelists up on stage. But while they're coming, so they're going to be talking to us a little bit about their recommendations, their tools, about how you can best utilize these next 3 days. But my one piece of advice to you is that no matter how many pieces of advice I give you, you still have to be the one that overcomes that fear. And at the end of those 3 days, you have to make that decision to jump. So please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage. And as they're walking up, I'm going to introduce them to you. There we go. Okay, first of all, we have Saifuddin Abdullah, who is the CEO of Global Movement of Moderates and the former Deputy Minister of Higher Education and the President of Malaysian Youth Council. We also have Professor Dr. Saran Korbil, who is the Executive Director. The Executive Director of the ASEAN Youth Volunteer Program and has developed and implemented the inaugural program on the development of ASEAN Youth Eco-Leaders through volunteerism and community engagement, which is a 5-week program for 100 youth leaders. And then next we have Kima Nara, who joins us from Cambodia. He is an innovative project officer of Transparency International Cambodia and assistant to Asia Pacific Regional Coordinator of UN Convention Against Corruption. She has been actively volunteering and leading youth social projects since 2009. And last but certainly not least, we have Ilak Angelo Diaz. Ilak is the Executive Director of My Shelter Foundation, which focuses on creating sustainable solutions for using recycled materials for the building of clinics and classrooms in rural areas. All right, so please join me in welcoming our panelists. Okay, so I made my way across the other side of the stage. We're going to open up and get some ideas flowing. So my first question to all of you is, what is one big idea you've had that would create massive social change? Just something where you thought to yourself, wow, someone really needs to do X, Y, Z. It would totally change the world. We're up first.
So what my specialty became was disasters. I was in the middle of one of the worst disasters in 2008, and it basically knocked down, this was about 250 km/h winds, and I woke up the next day and most of the city was underwater and there was brownouts, and most of the city there were a lot of poor people without lights. And so what I said is, how do I create the biggest emergency lighting system but for people that live below $2 a day? And so what we did was we started saying we cannot import expensive solar lights because in about 2 years the battery breaks or the part breaks and you have to throw away everything. And people usually buy that on microcredit. So taking a plastic bottle with water and bleach, we stuck it through the roof of houses to get refracted light inside the houses. So during the day, they would be able to have sunlight, 55 watts of sunlight, and we were cooperating with another Brazilian called Alfredo Mosser. But the real important one was community-built solar systems, where we took parts from broken transistors and receivers, and were able to put a solar panel, and we were able to light up the night. But the way that we revolutionized it was to open source it around the world. And we put up a video. And in that video, it hit about 4 million hits within the first month. And we opened up the way to build it, and next thing you know, we had 25 countries that were replicating what we did. So wanting to build the cheapest and most radical solar light made out of recycled materials, we ended up lighting the world. And so that was the big idea. But we often say that's not the idea that should, we're not advocating that it should be the idea, but we should get more and more people thinking about solutions that are easy to get, replicate, but the best thing of all is, and the purest, is to take yourself out of the solution. The purest form of charity is to make yourself obsolete, and that's the greatest idea for revolutionizing the world.
I'm from Cambodia, and in Cambodia, we don't really talk about things, but rather we are being affected, or we just do it. Like we are not there to talk about corruption, but we are affected by corruption. And we don't dare to talk about politics, but we end up being the victim of the decisions of politicians. And in the Pol Pot region, people are traumatized by the ideas of going into that regime again. And old people are so afraid to talk about that. And they want their child to not talk about politics. And I never imagined myself working in politics. But then I realized that it's the key to better change, to better improvement for my country. So I realized that the project that can make my country better is to engage the youth, to involve in politics, and to demand for better governance, for transparency and integrity. So I have seen projects in different provinces in my country, about 5-6 provinces, and in that, the youth are the ones who go to their community and ask their people, what do you think of our education system? Whether the school is good, whether the teaching quality is good, whether the road is good. What do you think can be better? What do you think our communal leader can serve us better? And then they bring those ideas from the people to their community leader, and then their community leader respond to that. It was a surprise because we thought the community leader do not really want to respond to people, but actually they do, because they also want to get the support from people. And as the better community it is, the better they get the vote, and also the better life for everyone. So it works to have the youth involved in politics, to help them demand for better governance. So that's the project that impressed me.
Thank you. Good evening. I think it's wonderful to be here and to welcome all the youth leaders, potential youth leaders from across ASEAN. You are the ones who hold in your hearts, in your minds, and in your hands the future of our region. And if I were to ask you, before you came here, because I could see from the videos, the word ASEAN was used a lot. Did you feel ASEAN? Or do you feel ASEAN at all? What would your answer be? Do you feel ASEAN? Yes? That's His Excellency from the ASEAN Secretariat. But chances are, it's a very natural reaction that most would say no. Except maybe I would have expected the AYEP alumni to have said yes. But that catalyzed really what was needed by the ASEAN Secretariat. The ASEAN Secretariat felt that they had the idea, through His Excellency and what he said in his speech, to develop an opportunity for youth to to come together to develop that ASEAN-ness. Because you talk about, you've heard so many times this evening about the ASEAN social-cultural community. But what exactly does it mean? So you've got to go down to the ground. But they had nobody to work on it for them. So rhetorics is one thing, but actually putting it into action is the other. So when I listen to all that is going to be carried out in the next 3 days, there's so much of synergy between what you're doing for YSEALI as well as the ASEAN Youth Volunteer Program, which is a 5-week program. Because this ASEAN Secretariat needed to be able to develop amongst the next generation or amongst you the feeling of ASEAN-ness. And you can only do that if you work collaboratively together, which is what you're doing for this program as well, which is what we did for the ASEAN Youth Volunteer Program. And when you do that, you have to work on an area or an issue that would make a difference to the region, which is what, again, you'll be doing in the next 3 days, and which we did for our program for the development of ASEAN eco-leaders through volunteerism and community engagement. When we put up that program last year, and we notified ASEAN youth that we wanted to have this program, we were overwhelmed with a response. We had 850 youth from across the region applying for 100 places. That was amazing. The second program that we're going to have this year is in August again. This will be the development of ASEAN heritage leaders. Already from the expressions of interest, we already have 700. So we can expect it to go even more than that. So there seems to be, Sarah, a hunger and a need amongst the youth. They themselves recognize the value of this kind of work and the need to develop leadership, because you will go back to your respective countries and create the multiplied effect of engaging with the communities and ensuring that you develop initiatives that can benefit the communities within your environment, as you have heard as well from our colleagues on the stage. So I think that will help to change not only the region, but eventually the world. Thank you.
Yeah, clap. I think that has a lot of you clap for me. You know, when I was much more handsome than I am now, and that was many years back. Since then and until now, I'm a firm believer that youth are not only leaders of tomorrow, but they are leaders of today in at least 3 categories. That they are leaders of those who are younger than them, they are leaders of those who are of their own age cohort, and with government they are co-leaders. And since '96, I started talking about, this is not my idea, but I started amplifying this concept and this approach called youth empowerment. The definition, the idea is very simple, that young people must be enabled to think and act on their own. Now that's not a very popular thing in this country. I get lots of flack from my government and from some of my elders. But I'm happy to say that today, I think if you were to travel around Malaysia, you will see pockets and examples of activities that came out of youth empowerment as an idea. We have Zamir, who started Fish for Malaysia, and he's one of our mentors here. We have Buku Jalanan. If I were to translate into English, it means street book. You have street basketball, you have street football, this is street books, because Malaysian young people don't really want to go to the library. So if the mountain don't come to Muhammad, Muhammad goes to the mountain. So basically, you bring the library to the streets, you discuss books, you organize things. And there are now like 40 chapters of Buku Jalanan or street books in Malaysia, by Malaysians, in Australia, up to the UK, up to Cardiff, and I'm told it's also now in the US. Now, the whole idea is not about one single program, but enabling young people to think and act on their own. And they become co-partners to whoever the leaders are today. That's the idea.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so we have a lot of questions to get through and a lot of advice and knowledge to impart upon you all. So I'm going to ask you all to keep your answers 30 seconds or less. Okay, so next question is, what is the biggest mistake that you have made when working with a team on a new project? Whoever wants to start.
Okay. So, since I'm the youngest, so let me start.
And then one of the bravest.
Thank you. So, one big mistake based on my very small experience. So, I used to think that as long as we have a team of really, really smart people with various of skill, we can do anything. But then I realized that we need some more ingredients to the success. Not just strong people, not just very smart people, but we need people to be on the same page and understand the goals and share the same vision. And make sure that everyone are on the same page every time and they are committed to make the step toward the goals that they are sharing. If the team are so smart but they have very divided idea, we would not reach anywhere. And that's what I learned from my first camping at the US Understate Great Alumni Association workshop and the project that we did for the camping.
Thank you. By a story. I'm sharing this with you. Can you imagine if you are in a hall 5 times bigger than this, with people 5 times more than what we have in this hall?